Welcome to Language Access Matters, the podcast that dives deep into the crucial role of language access in public services and businesses. I am your host, Carol Velandia, and I invite you to join me on a journey of discovery and empowerment. Language access is not just a matter of convenience. It is a fundamental human right and the key that unlocks doors to essential services and opportunities. In this podcast, we'll explore the far-reaching impact of language access, examining how it shapes not only healthcare, justice, and education, but also the world of business. Through thought-provoking interviews, insightful discussions, and compelling stories, we will unveil the power of language access. We will hear from professionals who bridge communication gaps to provide quality care for diverse communities. We will explore the intersection of language, law, and justice, and the crucial role that interpreters and translators play in ensuring fair and equitable treatment. We will delve into the challenges and innovations, as well as how language access opens doors to effective communication and inclusion, and how it makes our society more equitable. But our exploration doesn't stop there. We will also uncover the profound impact of language access in the world of business. We will hear from entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and experts who understand the value of inclusive and effective communication and how it drives success in today's global marketplace. Language Access Matters is your platform to understand the significance of language access in these vital sectors of society. We will shed light on the barriers faced by individuals and communities and the innovative solutions that promote inclusion and equality. Whether you are a healthcare professional, a legal expert, an educator, a business owner, a linguist, an advocate, or simply passionate about the power of language, this podcast is for you. Together, we will navigate the challenges, celebrate the victories, and advocate for a world where language access truly matters. So, join me on this enlightening journey as we uncover the impact of language access in healthcare, justice, education, and businesses. Let's amplify the voices of the 25 million people that don't speak English in the United States and those that don't speak the dominant language around the world. Those voices deserve to be heard and empowered, and we need to empower ourselves to build a more inclusive future. Welcome to Language Access Matters. Let's embark on this transformative exploration together. I'm delighted to have you here on Language Access Matters Live. This is the first time we're doing a live event. And I want to introduce all of you, although she does not need introduction, Nora Díaz, who is an English and Spanish translator and conference interpreter who enjoys using technology and finding ways to increase productivity, which combined with her love of technique of teaching has led her to share what she has learned through a blog, articles, webinars, and workshops. In fact, I have attended a couple of live teachings by Nora Díaz, and I have learned a great deal. And Nora is also the chair of the American Translation Association Professional Development Committee, and she's also a co-host of the AI in Translation Summit and AI in Interpretation Summit, and is the co-author of the Translators Toolbook Box Book. Since 2023, Nora has developed and taught generative AI hands-on webinars, workshops, and courses for language professionals in an effort to help translators and interpreters acquire the skills, tools, and know-how that will help them remain relevant in a changing landscape. Nora was listed as one of the top 30 women in the language industry by Multilingual Magazine in 2023, was the recipient of the American Translators Association Innovation Award in 2024, and in early 2025 was featured in Multilingual Magazine's Language Industry Influencers issue. Welcome, Nora. I'm delighted to have you here.
Carol, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very, very happy to be here.
So besides all that wonderful bio, why don't you tell our listeners about your story, about how you became Nora Díaz of today?
I decided to become a translator and an interpreter. Actually, being a conference interpreter was my goal. And I decided that when I was still in high school and didn't even know a second language. So that was a decision that came backwards to me, probably as compared to many of my colleagues who were bilingual or multilingual first. And so I decided, well, if I want to do this, I have to learn a second language.
Mhm.
And that's how it all started. And then, as for what I do today, in addition, I'm still a translator and a conference interpreter, but I also like sharing a lot of what I learn. And that came about simply because I love teaching. I was trained as a teacher and a teacher trainer,
Okay.
and I simply love teaching. So I'm sure it happens to you too, Carol, and to everyone who loves to teach. You discover something new and it's helpful for you. So you feel like you have to share it with others because it may help them. So I started writing a blog and participating very actively on um, translator forums, sharing what I had learned and helping others solve tech issues. Started teaching webinars and presenting at meetings, and so that's how I have come to do what I do today.
That's awesome. This is a good segue to ask about artificial intelligence and technology, and how, I am one of those that persons that it is afraid of technology and has struggled with it, because it's such a new type of thing for me, like AI. And thanks to your teachings, I it's become easier. But how did you get into that as a translator?
Well, I like technology in general. I have always liked it, and it's always fun to play with for me, it's always fun to play with new things and kind of test the capabilities and what you can do, what you cannot do. And when AI came on the scene, or generative AI came on the scene a couple of years ago, then it was just natural for me to start playing with that, and to start discovering how it could be integrated into the work that I do every day as a translator and as an interpreter. So basically, for me, it's just a love of technology. I know what you're saying. I mean, I hear that a lot, being afraid of technology, and also, Carol, being so busy that you don't have the time to go and explore things. So for me, for example, some of it has been very intentional. For example, there are some. I'm a linguist by training, right? I
Mhm.
am not an engineer or a technical person, so it is, or it was at the beginning, a little bit harder for me to understand what, out of for example, when there was a time when I was learning regular expressions, regex, and I decided that I wanted to learn that, but there was nothing specifically for translators. I said to myself, I have to understand this and I have to learn it, and distill whatever is useful for us, because not everything is for translators. Just out of that whole universe of regular expressions, a part of it is applicable for us. And so I decided that I had to be intentional about it. And I made a decision to get up 1 hour earlier than usual and sit down for 1 hour and learn about regex. And I did that for about 3 months. Um, until I felt that I had a good grasp of what I needed. And then that was it. Because unless I do that, the day gets away from me. I don't know if it happens to you or to those who are joining us. And so um, I'll say I'll do it, and then I never get around to it. So I think that intentionality is important. And that can be, for me, many times it is finding something that I can read and I can learn from, or going to a class, taking a class from someone, watching a webinar. So we just have to be, I think, intentional about it.
Yes, I love that message, intentionality about what you do, and also letting the fear go. I know that, at least for me, anytime I try something new, where I consider myself not skilled, I would be approaching it very slowly, and not eager. But it seems like you jump right on it when a generative AI came about, and you were the first one that started posting on LinkedIn, at least among my circle of friends. What would you say to to a translator that has been doing this for a long time, and what would you say to a translator that's just starting in the in the translation field, and also for interpreters.
About technology and
Yes,
AI,
about
what I say to that?
how to jump to it.
Yeah, I think again, you have to set aside the time to take a class. If you like technology and if you like self-directed learning, then you should be fine just by setting aside the time to sit down and read something and learn something. If you feel more comfortable attending a class, then come to a class, where you will feel welcome and there will be others who are exploring the technology just like you, and that sense of community really means a lot because it means you can get to share how you feel about things, and learn together and share what you have learned and everything. Now, I think it has to be a personal decision to do this because the technology is there, the AI is there for us to learn and explore. But no matter, I think adoption, the part about adoption has to be a personal decision. And I think you have to make a decision to stay in this if you make a decision to stay in the profession, because we hear a lot about people who are considering leaving the profession because of what's happening right now. But if you make a decision to stay, and then you should know that you're going to do well, and you just need to make sure that you have all the tools at your disposal for things to go as well as possible. And
Mhm. Sorry,
yeah,
go
and I just wanted to say, for that distinction that you made between newcomers and those who are more experienced, I think it's easier for newcomers to embrace technology and AI and everything. But for those who are more experienced, who have been here longer, just know that your expertise, your experience is so valuable. So enhance it with that technological know-how.
But Nora, I think that part of the fear is precisely what you mentioned about losing your job to technology, right? I think that's part of the fear of many is, okay, what would be the point to knowing through like AI that AI can do everything? And so that's, I think, part of the fear is not only the inadequacy to not know how to approach technology, programming, etc., but also the fear of losing one's job or of becoming irrelevant. But you're saying that it's actually probably not going to happen, right?
Well, it's going to happen in some situations. I think we would be naive to say that it won't happen. It has already happened. It's happening. But I think part of the fear comes also from a misunderstanding or a misconception of what AI is and what it can do. So I find that a very common feedback or comment that I get from people who come and take webinars or courses that I teach is, after we are done with the course or with the webinar, they will say, I had no idea. I thought this was something else. I didn't realize that it was something that could help me so much, that could enhance my work, that could help me be more productive, work faster, more effectively, etc. I thought it was simply something that was here to replace me. And so I think those are the two ways in which AI is impacting our profession. One is, yes, it can replace you in some situations, and it will, and it has already. But there has never been more translation work than today. We just heard that you and I were just at the Vamos Juntos conference in Mexico City, and Renato Beninato presented some data about the amount of work that is out there that requires human translators, human interpreters. I've heard that from other industry leaders as well. And it may simply be a matter of, we may not be able to continue working the way we were used to working in the past. We have to find new clients, new ways, new services, but there is still a need for us to be here. But I think the very first thing that we need to do is break down that misconception or that misunderstanding, or power through it and understand really what is happening and what these technologies are and how we can use them to our advantage.
Yes, as you said, this technology is more accessible than ever. Do you see any difference between what's happening in translation and what's happening in interpretation? Why don't you tell our listeners like the different types of technology for each of the professions and how each of these technologies is impacting their job?
Yes, I think there is a big difference. For translation, and this is something that I also want to clarify. People, and I'm not saying people in the profession, but people in general may think that this is something new, the ability to do automated translation, machine translation, but it's not new. So it's not something new. What's new is that it used to be that only language professionals, or for the most part, it was language professionals who had access to these tools or who had knowledge of these tools. And now with generative AI, with ChatGPT, and of course Gemini and Grok and all of those chatbots that we keep hearing about, this has become more accessible in a way. More people have it. More people have an account on ChatGPT, etc. And so they think that, or one of the first things that they thought that they realized they could do was translate with large language models, with generative AI. And so maybe someone who in the past would hire a translator to translate, I don't know, a 2-page article, today feels like I don't need a translator. I can just translate it using machine translation or generative AI. And those are the types of jobs or the types of situations in which translators are being replaced. But I can tell you that I still have clients who will come to me and say, I want you to translate this. Then I'll ask, is it okay if I use machine translation or AI? And they'll say, no, no, that's fine. Use whatever you need. Just make sure the translation is good, it's correct, and it's back to me in time, on time, based on what they need, the deadline. Um, on the other hand, then, so we have that big impact of that accessibility, where on your phone or on your computer, practically everybody can have access to machine translation services. And again, they're not new, but more people have become aware of them now because of what's happening, right? Because of the visibility of large language models. So translators are seeing a greater impact also because the types of services that we used to provide, or that our clients used to require, have changed. So a few years ago, you would be asked to translate from scratch or to translate using translation memories. And then that changed to a combination of translation memory and machine translation, where maybe you had to translate part of it, or maybe you had to post edit. That means editing or reviewing the output of machine translation. And today, it's very rare that you get a request where you are asked to translate from scratch.
Okay.
I have a lot of clients who are LSPs, so agencies, language service providers, and a lot of the requests that I'm getting are for machine translation post editing. And this
Yes.
is where, as language professionals, we have a decision to make. Do I want to provide this service, or do I not want to provide the service? Because some people don't like doing post editing.
Right. And I think there was an assumption previously that the job, the when you got the assignment, the pre-translation was so bad that you needed to do even more work to finalize it.
Yeah, exactly. So I always say that we used to laugh at Google Translate,
Yes.
and now Google Translate laughs at us because it's sometimes all you need to do is read it, and verify that everything's okay, that nothing's missing, that nothing has been added. Make sure the terminology is consistent. And so even that service, machine translation post editing, has become, there's two different types of post editing these nowadays. There's light post editing and there's full post editing. And light machine translation post editing would not have been possible with the poor quality machine translation engines of the past. But
Okay.
today, because there are some that are so good, it's possible to do light post editing, which is basically just reading through and catching, spotting, occasional errors here and there. And so that's why the translation industry or translators have been impacted more by what's happening today, because basically, because we are not being asked to provide the same types of services that we were asked to provide in the past. And that is very visible, I think, for us as translators. Now, for interpreters, it's a different story. If you are a community interpreter, it's very unlikely, or it should be, um, it should not be the case that you are being replaced by a machine, because especially in, very sensitive situations like healthcare interpreting or legal, court interpreting, where do you want to put your health and your life and your fate in the hands of a machine, where the machine has no way of determining, context and brokering the exchange, the communication on the spot. And so I think there's less of an impact there, at least for now. But in other areas, for example, conference interpreting, which is what I do, where you could argue, and I'm saying you could argue because I was at an interpreting assignment yesterday where this wasn't the case, but you could argue that for example, the presentations are more structured, and it would be easier to replace the interpreters with the machine-based solution, an AI-based solution. Um, that is probably happening already, and we don't even know about it because, and I was discussing this with a colleague the other day, in interpreting, you, especially, for example, when you are a freelance interpreter, you don't realize why you are not getting calls, because there could be a number of reasons. It could be someone else has taken the assignment. It could be there is no need for interpreting because there are no foreign speakers, or it could be that you are being replaced by a tech solution, by an AI-based solution, and you wouldn't hear about it. Because it's not like, if the client is not going to hire you, it's not like they're going to call you and tell you why they're not going to hire you,
Right.
right?
Never,
So,
it almost never happens, right?
exactly.
Thank you for clarifying these two instances for translation and interpreting. And I remember that the one of the reasons why we decided to have this conversation live was precisely when it comes to public services and how important is to have a human in the loop approach for translations related to healthcare, justice, education, and also for interpretation related to public services, because there is the aspect of language access that, as you all know, I'm forever interested in, and this podcast is called Language Access Matter. So how do we tie this back to the relevance to language access?
Well, let me tell you a little story. I was, maybe about a year ago, I was at an on-site interpreting assignment with a client that I often work with. And I was talking to him during the break, and some of the attendees were around and they were joining in the conversation. And I was asking them, I said, because I know this is because of the setting, and because I do this twice a year with this client, I know that these participants, they sit in the front row, and I can see that they have, they're young people, and they are very tech savvy. So I often see that they have either a machine translation solution open on their laptop as they're taking the class, and they are not fluent in English. And I am usually sitting near, the interpreters are usually sitting near the speaker. And I see that during the breaks, they come to him and they bring their phone with them, and, to try to communicate directly. Many, many times, Carol, what happens is they give up and they'll call us. They say they give up trying to communicate via their phone. And so they'll signal to us to approach and to help them communicate. And so I asked them that day, so what do you think? Do you think AI could replace us, could replace the interpreters? And one of them said to me, I think it could replace about 80% of what you do. half jokingly, right? But he said about 80% of what you do. And said the speaker was right there. And so I turned to the speaker and I said, well, if that's the case, what 20% of your message would you be willing to, let go, misunderstood or confused or translated incorrectly or something? And so that, I think that's a very interesting question to ask of our clients, because even if AI based solutions can offer, I don't know, 90% accuracy, if you were in a healthcare situation, which 10% of that
Exactly.
message are you okay with being lost?
Which 1%, right? Like, would you
1%,
would
right?
you want the 1% that decided which side of your body to cut in to be wrong?
Right.
Which,
Or the dosage of the medications that you have to take, things like that, that may seem irrelevant, but they're very important.
right,
And
or the years in jail versus the days or versus the months. I mean, really, when we think about the stakes, especially in public services, but also you just brought the example of also when you are teaching a conference of any topic. The question is like, what percentage of your message, or are you willing to sacrifice because of the potential errors that AI can bring about? So I think it's very important to emphasize that, at least in the language access sphere, we have to be mindful that the information has to be accurate as much as possible and complete as much as possible, right? So humans in the loop approaches in that segment are absolutely essential.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think you and I talked about this also when we had lunch in Mexico City. There are all these false expectations that are being built around the technology. For example, I see on social media lots of people promoting translation earbuds. And the way they announce them is like, oh, now with these, and I have them, I actually, I don't know where I left them, but I bought a pair just to
Oh,
test them. And
really?
I'll tell you the results of my test. But the way they announce these or they advertise them or promote them is, oh, now with these earbuds, I can watch my favorite shows in a foreign language and I don't have to miss anything. Or if I have to interact with someone, then it's easy to have a conversation with them. That sounds ideal, but it's utopic at this point, at least, because let me tell you what really happens with those earbuds. First of all, the earbuds themselves do nothing. All they do is they are connected to an app. So they're basically Bluetooth earbuds, but you need an app. That first and foremost means, Carol, that you need an internet connection for this to work. And in some, at least I live in Mexico, and at least in some areas of Mexico, there is no reliable internet all the time. So if you are in a remote location where there is no internet, this is not going to work. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you would think this is simultaneous interpreting, but it's not. Really, what it is the well, behind the scenes, what's happening is the earbuds, or actually not the earbuds, but your phone, the microphone on your phone will pick up the audio. For example, if I were using the earbuds now, I would have to have my phone here to pick up what you are saying. So it does does what is called speech to text. So your speech is converted to text first, and then that text is translated, machine translated. And then that machine translation of written text is read out loud via text to speech. So there are several steps that happen there. And because of the way that works, because of the way that technology works, it can be fine for basic things, and that's what you see people demoing in their social media posts. Things like, "Hello, how are you?" And then you don't say anything else. Of course, it can understand that and say it correctly into whatever language. But remember, that is all being done through an app on your phone, and then you hear it on the earphones. But if you are, for example, talking to someone who speaks more than two sentences in a row, which is what usually happens,
Mhm.
people speak for longer stretches of time, then the app decides when to stop the transcription, when to stop the speech to text, so that it can do its process of translating and then reading back to you. So if you are saying 5 sentences to me, maybe the app will decide that after 3 sentences, it's a good cutoff point. It takes a moment to do its thing, and you are already saying something else. And I'm just starting to hear the translation of what you said a minute ago.
Mhm.
So how is that simultaneous? Plus, in the process of that break, it misses whatever you were saying because it's busy, processing the information, and then it tries to pick it back up. So these are false promises. If someone is thinking, oh, with these earbuds, I can go to a school appointment or a medical appointment and I don't need an interpreter, or to a court and I don't need an interpreter, they are completely wrong. And they're in for a very, very bad surprise.
Yes, and I think it is misleading for us to extrapolate that something that's gonna, excuse me, that's gonna help us get around, for example, in a foreign country when we're asking where is the bathroom, or how do I find the train station. If we're extrapolating that to help us in a medical appointment or a court or educational setting, as you say, we're going to be disappointed. I didn't know the technology was like that, because we could actually achieve that without the app, just having the keyboard of a different language and just
Exactly.
say that and then read it back to us is a little
Right.
misleading, I
I
say.
mean, you could do that with Google Translate, couldn't you? With the app on your phone. But
Exactly.
then eh, you wouldn't have that expectation of it being simultaneous. And so at least you would say, okay, you say something, then you stop, then we wait for it to translate, then I say something, and then I stop. But to do it consecutive. But even if you're doing that, you can't really trust the technology all that much, in especially in high stakes settings, because how do we know it's using the right terminology, the right tone, picking up cultural nuances, all of the things that interpreters do?
But then on that note, I want to ask you, how much can we trust the humans when now
Well,
we have these tools that are AI? Because I don't want us to, as you said, to be naive and say like, oh my God, humans are perfect. So let's talk about the human aspect now that we have competition, if you will, with AI.
oh, absolutely. I think in when you sent me the possible questions for today's conversation, there was a question there about quality, and the first thing that I added there as a note is human interpreters and human translators are no guarantee of quality. Um, and so that means that we have to continue, if our competition is AI and it's a machine. And again, I don't want to say that AI is terrible and you should never use it. Just like you said, if you are in a foreign country and you need to get around, how wonderful to have that technology to help you with the basics, as long as you remember that it will make mistakes, right? It's not 100% reliable. But then it's up to us as professionals in our everyday life to continue to um, get better. Just work on our own professional development, so that if our job is going to be to work with technology and to maybe even supervise AI in some way, that we are able to do it. Can I really tell when AI has gone wrong, or do I still need more training to be able to do that?
I want to know what you think about this. Well, I've been thinking that sometimes as professional translators, we worry so much about the precision of each word and sounding exactly accurate and all that, and I think it's good, right? But I also thought, especially when I started my interest in language access many years ago, that that shouldn't be all what we are about, precision of words, etc., etc., because at some point, and it's happening today, AI, or in that time, I didn't think about necessarily AI, but I thought technology is going to be so proficient in our languages that it's not going to be enough to just be a good linguist, right? And the key part of the profession that I actually um, focus on is our ethical standards, right? So not only determining, as you say, where is it that the perhaps the translation is wrong, but also how do we achieve equity, how do we achieve access for people, right? So that's more of the language access side. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that over focus on precision, when we know, not to say that we shouldn't, but to say that we need to branch out to be more than just good at language.
Oh, I agree. I agree because it's, of course, AI and machine translation, as you have so rightly pointed out, can be very, very good at language, and with the right prompts and the right preparation and everything, they can do a job, even our job, even better than us. If we think all we have to do is take words from one language and put them into another language.
Mhm.
So, yeah, what is our value added? And I love what you said about being a consultant, about the ethics of what we do. And I think that of course, it varies depending on the setting where we work as interpreters, for example, and also as translators, the clients that we work with and everything. But we have to make sure that we find that value added, that we develop our soft skills. And for the longest time, Carol, we have been invisible and we have been taught to be invisible, right? So, as
Mhm.
a conference interpreter, you're supposed to be there and no one should know that you're there. I have been at medical conferences where this happened to us once, where when at the end of the day, we were missing a receiver. Everybody gets a receiver, and we were missing a receiver at the end of the day. And then it was a 2-day conference. So the next day, one of the doctors came to the table where the technicians were distributing the receivers, and he had taken the receiver with him because he thought, this is many years ago, this is over 15 years ago. He said, I took it with me to see if it would be able to translate from TV for me, because he didn't realize there was someone doing the interpretation. He thought it was the little receiver doing all the work. He didn't real I mean, we are so used to being so invisible that he didn't realize there were interpreters sitting in a booth speaking for him to be able to understand what he was hearing. And so that means that we did a very good job at
Yes.
being invisible. But now is not the time to be invisible anymore. So
No.
we have
Yeah.
we have to become more visible. We have to be better advocates for ourselves. And I know that people like you who work in language access and these wonderful things are used to advocating for the user of our services, but
Mhm.
it's also time to advocate for ourselves. It's time to say, hey, I was there, I was the one who provided the service. And even to talk to our clients, I mean, I would love to see LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook flooded with videos and testimonials of our clients saying how we made their lives easier and what a difference it makes to have a human interpreter rather than having a machine interpret for them. I think we have to go beyond our own thoughts and opinions of what we think we bring to the table, and we have to go and ask our clients and then put that out there so that people, you know how it is when you see testimonials of a product or service, you feel like there's validation in that. So I think we have to do that. I think we have to stop being invisible, basically.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of things to comment on. First of all, there is so much value added by the humans, that doesn't that is besides only the quality of the language. And you probably have heard about Save AI, that initiative that Mila Golovine is one of the leaders of that effort. And in the study, they found that for example, the AI doesn't really pick up on certain nuances and certain contextual inputs. And I think that's where we as humans really, really excel more than AI. So that's one thing that we can focus on without, and finding that balance of really understanding, okay, this is a contextual thing that perhaps is missing in the communication, and not jump all the way to, oh, let me tell you, as Mexicans, we all eat, which is the other side of that role as interpreters, sometimes as cultural brokers. We sometimes go too far beyond what our role is. So finding that middle ground between the things that AI is not ready to do, right? And that we can do without going into stereotyping, etc. So I think that's one of the added values added that we have as human interpreters or translators. And I also think that as far as collaborating with the technology, we can enhance those interactions. But you also mentioned about being invisible and how good it is when we are invisible. Everybody has the feeling like everything went well, but nobody realized, as the client that you mentioned, that there was an interpreter behind this. And I love that story because, as you said, it means you did your job right. And then what you mentioned about advocacy, I think that there is some emphasis in here, at least in making our profession be more noticeable, more valued, because we are still a long way to go for people to understand really the impact of having language accessibility when you need it most. And I agree, we should ask our clients, especially the limited English proficient person, okay, what was your experience with this? And because I have asked at least a few of my clients, and they have come out to say, like, thanks to you, I understand it, I felt supported. And I think the support piece is sometimes undervalued, the person feeling that they can use their voice, which is their biggest asset, um, because there is someone there interpreting or translating what they're saying. And the last thing I wanted to mention, or comment on what you were saying, is that sometimes, and also connecting to the ethics piece of our role, is that sometimes if we are not really strict with the ethics of our profession, we might do things like, I heard yesterday from a client, I was providing training to the client, and I mentioned, try to use certified interpreters. And she said, well, actually, certified interpreters didn't make any difference, because I have been in meetings when the certified interpreter is just making stuff up, and I know that they are not saying the right thing because I also speak Spanish and all that. So it makes me think of how important ethics is, because sometimes people and finally, as I uncovered more what she meant by certified, it didn't mean an interpreter that was certified by a court, for example. It just meant someone who had a certificate of attendance to something, which is not the same as certified interpreter. But besides that, it really made me think, like, okay, we have to, as interpreters, we have to invest in training, we have to invest in being ethical people, being ethical professionals. So
Yeah, and I agree. And I think in a way, this just like what happened with the pandemic, where before, and just to give some context as to where I'm going with this, I am a conference interpreter located in a city that it's one of the major cities of Mexico, but it doesn't have big conferences every day like you would have in Mexico City, for example. And so pre-pandemic, I was limited to either working the major event, the big events that we have here, which usually happen around the summer and the fall. And I would travel with some of my clients to, for some other things occasionally. Then all of a sudden, clients didn't have to only hire locally or, have the big expense of flying in interpreters from other places. And so because of that, even today, I do a lot of remote interpreting that I never would have had access to before this was a thing, And part of what happened when that came about is that the interpreters who weren't doing such a great job stopped getting opportunities. And
Mm.
so, what I'm trying to say is an interpreter who wasn't all that good, but lived in a big city where there was a lot of work, was probably still getting some work or a lot of work just because of their geographic location. And then all of a sudden, clients didn't have to necessarily find someone or hire someone local. They could hire someone somewhere else, someone that did a good job. And so that meant that if you didn't have the skills, or you were difficult to work with, or all of those things, or you were late, things like that, like you said, it's not only about putting one language into another, it's a combination of things. Then those people found themselves having fewer and fewer opportunities.
Mm.
And so I think that's also the case here, because there's more competition. So that means we have to be on top of our game, or we have to be at our very best. And maybe this is going to be one of those situations where those who are not the greatest professionals are going to end up being called from the profession, not because they choose to leave, but because clients and colleagues and consultant interpreters who put together teams find that if you're not investing in your development and in being the best that you can be, maybe you are not, hireable, or, simply you're going to lose opportunities. I
Mhm.
think that's going to happen. I, I,
Okay.
I don't know, Carol, if you've heard, for example, also of clients coming back, trying AI and then coming back. I've heard a couple of stories. Have you heard?
Tell me what you've heard.
Well, I heard about an event where the client had decided very last minute to tell interpreters that they weren't needed, because they ended up using an app that was going to similar to what we were discussing earlier, but this was an app for the event. And then um, when they started, they realized that it wasn't going very well, and they called the interpreters to come in on the actual day, the first day of the event. And I don't know what the actual decision was made. Did they come back? That's as far as I heard. That they were called back and told, "Hey, this is not working. Can you please come back?" So that's one thing. Another thing that I heard is another event where they were also using an app, and my colleague, who um, was supposed to be one of the interpreters, and was told very last minute, like a couple of days before, that she wasn't going to be needed, ended up getting a link to listen in, you know, through the
Mhm.
app, and she shared it with me. And it was a vet event. It was a vet conference, a veterinarian conference about dairy cattle. And I was listening into the Spanish, and of course, the term calf.
Mhm.
This is where the expertise of a human is never going to be
Context, right?
the term exactly context. Calf can be a part of your leg, but it's also a small cow, a baby cow.
Mhm.
And so we know dairy interpreters who are experienced in dairy cattle interpreting know that the term is becerra in the female form, because for dairy, male calves are slaughtered. They are not
Mhm.
kept. Only
Mhm.
the female calves are kept. So you have to use the female form. But these are all of those things that you know because you're experienced in that. And I was listening to the interpreting on the app, and of course, instead of saying the name of the animal, it was saying the body part. So whenever the speaker would say calf, it would say like your on your leg.
Bueno, sí, I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pantorrilla, right?
Mhm.
Instead of becerra. And
Mhm.
so that's interesting. And my colleague went to the client and told him. And this is an interesting disconnect here, because she went back to them and said, "Do you realize this was happening? And I only listened to, maybe a few minutes, and that was it." And the thing is that the buyer of the service, in this case, the person who decided they were going to use the app, wasn't even at the conference. She ended up going to the actual user of the service, and that user talked to the buyer and said, no more. From now on, we need human interpreters, please.
Yes, and we did have a situation like that last year where we attended a large conference for police officers, and the interpreters were hired by the individual um, embassies. So, but some groups opted to use an app. But the event, I think I believe the event was offering the app right for free as part of the event, but the different embassies were hiring interpreters. So we were part of an interpreting crew, and we look at what the app said, and it didn't have audio. It was just into Spanish, and it was only written, and there were many incoherences there. And also, when the if the speaker had a different accent, like if it was not American speaker, but let's say Australian, or I think, or German with an English, and like speaking English with a German accent, more of the communication was lost. So we were
Right.
like, wow, we still have a job.
But the sad thing is, Carol, that um, if clients could understand that before the event, it would be better. But the problem is they only realize that happens during the event. Let me tell you another experience that I had personally, not replacing the interpreter, but trying to use technology to replace the equipment that we use for conference interpreting.
Mhm,
So usually when you do conference interpreting, there is a group of technicians who set up a booth, and
mhm.
they route the audio and everything, and they take care of all of that. Well, this client, when I got to the event, they never told me before, or us, the interpreting team. When we got to the event, um, I was there first, and then I said, okay, where is the booth? And they said, oh, no, there's no booth. Sit wherever you'd like. It was an auditorium. They were playing loud music. And so I said, yeah, but I can't. I need to be in an isolated area where I can hear.
Right,
Where
right.
is the equipment? No, there's no equipment. We're going to use an app. Okay. And where is my transmitter? Your what? They hadn't thought about that, so they only hired the app. Someone on the organizing team bought the app. They didn't think the interpreters will need a transmitter, they will need a special microphone. Nothing whatsoever. They ended up giving us a little room, an office, which they brought the video feed into the office, all very ad hoc, very last minute. um, and when I talked to some of the attendees who were coming from Latin America, for this was in the States, I asked them how it was going, because this is an event that I work every year. And in previous years, we had the regular equipment and everything, and it was never a problem. There was never an issue. And they said, oh, the internet comes and goes, so we can't really hear you guys.
What a
So
nightmare.
and then people are asked to bring their own earphones and their phone fully charged. So if their phone runs out of charge, the battery dies, or they don't have the right earphones, or the internet is not good, it doesn't work.
Yes, so a couple of things about the multiple stories here is one, like if you have a client that is going to receive poor interpretation, and that client is powerful in this common sense of the word, they're gonna say, like, this doesn't work. I need to understand what I'm buying. I need to understand this training. I pay for this training, etc. So they are not gonna be okay with haphazard solutions. But for clients like our limited English proficient person that's in a vulnerable situation, they're less likely to say, like, okay, I need some other solution because I am not understanding this machine that you're putting in front of me. And
Right.
they are less likely to advocate. So I
Yeah.
think that in that, interpreters specifically or have a prime role as um, advocacy, in the sense that, for example, if they are offering a technology solution, right? And I'm not sure how this would look in real life, but for example, if you're receiving interpretation through Zoom, right, for an end of life kind of interaction, I would hope that the limited English proficient person said, like, not necessarily the patient, but the family of the patient, like, I would prefer to have a person to interpret for this situation, right? Obviously, it would be even better if the hospital would say, we're not using technology, we're going to have a human being, because the human touch in that moment is super important. So there are many instances where we try to apply technology and it's just not going to work, whether before we don't have everything that's needed to be effective, or because it will be inhuman simply. So those are the instances that I think, okay, we still need to have humans in the loop for the interactions that occur in public services. And how can we as interpreters emphasize that to the potential users, right? So I'm thinking, I don't know what your thoughts on that are, because I know that you work mostly as a conference interpreter, but some food for thought. How do we as interpreters become more effective, sort of not avoiding technology, but demanding that the communication is effective, even if technology is involved or if technology is not involved, but that we feel that is part of our calling or our responsibility.
Yeah, I think the answer is, or part of the answer could be storytelling, right? Sharing stories, because if we hear from people, and especially like you said, limited English proficiency people who could say, "Look, I was involved or I participated in an exchange like this, and it went like this, and it would have been better if there had been a human there to help." Those kinds of stories, I think, are what can make a difference.
Yeah.
Because if we only talk about specs, technical specifications and capabilities, for some people, you read a prospect and you read a leaflet and you say, well, this looks good. But then if you hear stories of when it wouldn't have gone so well, when it didn't go so well, or it would have been better to have something different, then maybe people can stop and think, oh, yeah, maybe this is not a one size fits all solution.
Right. So Nora, we're almost at the end of our live podcast, and I wanted to ask you before we go two more questions. One is with regards to communities for whom technology is not accessible. If you have any thoughts on, for example, communities of languages in the US that have difficulty even finding an interpreter, how technology can help bridge that gap. But also at the same time, what happens if they don't have access to technology, right? so so I see that technology operates in two different ways. First, offering more access, but also if the person lives in a remote area, just like the example you brought up before, that made me think, okay, but what if they don't even have access to that? So help me visualize something that can be helpful, and how
Yeah.
technology can bridge that gap.
Well, I think, I don't know. Again, we have been talking a lot about the shortcomings of the technology when it comes to providing unsupervised language services. But we also have to acknowledge the benefits of having the technology for situations like what you have described, where there may not be a human available, or there are I don't know, for whatever reason, people are in a remote area, or something like that. But how? eh, I don't know if I mean, I understand the need to advocate for that access to be more universal, but I don't know if it's the job of linguists to do that. I think it's probably raising awareness among developers would be the main thing that we could do. Companies will work, developers will work on developing solutions that are profitable. And sadly, these may not be the most profitable ones. And so, if ideally, if there could be someone out there who finds it in their good heart to invest the resources that are needed to reach these populations. But even, things like what you were saying, what if they don't even have access to the devices? That's what I think,
Mhm.
right? What if you think about very impoverished areas, and I'm thinking of some indigenous communities, for example, in Mexico, where they may not even have access to the internet, but of course we can bring in satellite internet nowadays, and so that can help with part of the problem. So how can that be solved? I think that's a bigger problem than we can tackle. But
Yeah,
what
for sure.
what we can do is, of course, advocate for that and help give a voice to those who, because of their situation, may not have a voice. And that's where I commend you and everyone who is doing something in the advocacy area to raise that awareness, because I think if we don't speak about something, then no one knows it's there, right? So at least
Yeah.
raising your voice and saying, look, this is important.
Yes, I believe that the what is it the saying? The squeaky wheel always gets the oil. So I think that if more people can know about their rights, if more people say, I need an interpreter, even if they are remote, and precisely if they are remote, actually, at some point things are going to change. And finally, because this podcast is called Language Access Matters, I want to know, what does language access mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Well, I think language access, first of all, I have to say again, thank you to you and to others who are speaking so much about language access, because that has raised my own awareness about language access. Because sometimes, from our privilege of I don't have an issue with language access, I have access to everything I need, we don't even think about the need for language access. So we have to keep our ears open. And to me, this is a reminder. Language access is a reminder of the power that language has to include or exclude. And this is clear to us when, it's even almost like a joke sometimes on a show or a movie where you see people talking behind someone's back by using a language that that person cannot understand. But
Mhm.
that is it may be used as a comedy device, but it's actually a way of excluding people. And so people can end up feeling excluded or being excluded because of a lack of language access. And with language access, people can be included.
Mhm.
And of course, then, as you said earlier, people who need to use their voice to say something in a language they can speak. So language access is a way to empower someone, or to also to silence someone. Because what if someone has something to say, but there isn't an interpreter available to give them a voice to help them say what they want to say? So inclusion, exclusion, empowerment, or silencing, that's what this means to me. And as for us as language professionals, as translators and interpreters, it's a responsibility, and one that even if we are not completely involved in scenarios or situations involving language access, we have to keep in mind, because we're not just bridging worlds by using our words, right? We're building connections and opening doors for people, making sure that no one is left behind simply because they speak a different language. And so I think it's a very powerful concept, and one that is innately humane, and human. And so that's why technology can be a great aid, but it will never replace the human touch when it comes to language access, I think.
Thank you, Nora. I think we accomplished something very good, because I love to hear that you learn about language access, because we met, and I also learned a lot about AI because we met. So we sort of interchange knowledge, and I love that. So great accomplishment. I think bringing those together is wonderful. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. This will be recorded, and I will share it with everybody. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the stream now.
And that wraps up another enlightening episode of Language Access Matters. We hope you have enjoyed our discussion on the profound impact language access has across various sectors of society. Let's remember that language access is not just an isolated topic. It intertwines with various fields, impacting lives and businesses in profound ways. As we continue this journey together into becoming a more inclusive society where we ensure equal access to services to those who don't speak the dominant language, we want to assure you that our company, Equal Access Language Services, through its podcast Language Access Matters, will be with you every step of the way. We are committed to bringing you thought-provoking conversations, expert opinions, and stories from the field and beyond. To dive deep into the subject matter and engage with leading experts in the field, we will release a new episode of Language Access Matters once a month. By featuring expert practitioners and individuals with diverse experiences, we aim to broaden the scope of our discussions and present a comprehensive view of the importance of language access. We encourage you to stay connected with us through our website, www.equalaccesslanguageservices.com, and our social media platforms. You can join the conversation, ask questions, and share your own stories and experiences. If you want to be part of our podcast, email us to podcast@equalaccesslanguageservices.com. Remember, language access matters to each and every one of us. By understanding its significance and actively working towards its advancement, we can create a more inclusive and equitable society. Thank you for being a part of the Language Access Matters community. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment with you in our future episodes.